We are back. You are chatting with John P. Today, I am going to be covering 5 watches and maybe even one bonus watch that will double in price. In watches today, there's 2 trains of thought, right? We have people that like to call watches investments, and we have people or collectors that don't necessarily look at watches as investments and look at them more as toys, hobby, or fun, or even a piece of jewelry. I think sometimes you can have a little bit of both, but as a disclaimer, I'm not advising that anyone necessarily invests in watches because I think there are better investments out there. But if you're going to be buying watches anyway, these 5 are all great watches that, if you like, will likely double in price, if not more, in the short term. So the first watch, almost forgot. Actually, at delraywatch.com, we have some of these watches as well as some other great watches. And actually, Federico just marked down a bunch of very cool pieces in the hot deal section. Shameless plug, onto the list. So the first watch that will double in price is the Rolex 16550 Explorer II. Let me show you it. I actually have it on my wrist today. The 16550. There'll be a picture here. Here's the thing with this watch. This watch is different than the 16570 in that it has a thicker case. It has a thicker bezel with the numbers on the bezel being a lot more thick and a lot more kind of announced. They really show themselves on the bezel compared with the 570, as well as it has a tritium dial. And what I love about this watch is it has the old movement, so it's much more vintage, and they only produced these for a couple of short years until Rolex came out with the 570 and made it a little bit more slim on the wrist. They made it a little bit more modern because this was a transitional period, right? In the late 80s, you have these kind of transitional times in a lot of brands, including Rolex. And I bought this watch for myself in my personal collection about 6 or 7 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, and already it's climbed about 25 or 30% in retail price. And so every day these are drying up a little bit more and more. With this particular reference, if you sent it back into Rolex in the earlier days for a service, they would actually swap the bezel a lot of times, as well as the dial. They would take the tritium dial off and they would put on the modern dial from the 570. And so many of the 550s exist out there, but they have a newer dial or a newer bezel, and that ruins the collector value that we all know. So if you are hunting for one, make sure to find the original bezel that's thicker, as well as make sure it has the tritium dial, and that one is going to double and only getting higher every day as they dry up on the market. Now the next one, the Omega Seamaster 300 165.024. So not current generation, of course. You can see the picture here. This is an old watch. But the original Seamaster 300 dive watch, 42 millimeter in size, plexiglass crystal. I love this watch. Now, just in the last 5 years, these have about doubled in price, if not gone up a little bit more. The thing with this reference is condition is everything. You can find really bad condition versions of this watch at about $4,000 head only, but the good examples go between $6,000 really to $10,000, but you if you hunt around, you can find these at $6,000. They're not making more of this watch, much like the 16550, and that is true scarcity. A lot of people are wearing these, right? And they are getting beat up and knocked around, and a lot of these float around in poor condition. But if you get a good condition and you keep it away, which I don't necessarily think you should do, but if that's what you're looking to do, you keep it away, you put it in your safe. These things are only going up and up. As Omega establishes them as more of a luxury brand to compete with Rolex, the prices on these things are just going to go through the roof because it's an iconic staple sports watch piece in a modern size. It's 42. A lot of vintage watches are smaller. This is a modern size, so it's also wearable. You can see the same thing that happened with Rolex watches. As they became more in demand, the Daytonas became a powerhouse, iconic model, well, all the vintage Daytonas went up in price. So that is going to be the next one. Now, this next one I know is on very few people's radar, but the ones that know, and the ones that know are adding these to their collection, and that is the Enicar Sherpa lineup. Now, this is going to be the Enicar Sherpa professional lineup, so the sports watches that are made. There's a whole handful of them. There'll be some pictures here. You'll have to go around. There's a couple websites that focus specifically on Enicar watches. Here's the thing with Enicar watches. A lot of times they use famous movements, they use things like Valjoux 72s, and a lot of times they do look like other models, right? There's some Pepsi bezel versions, I think there's some Coke bezel versions, but they also have compressors, right? They have deep dive watches, and these are very well made watches that look nice, especially in the flesh. Day by day, these are drying up, and to find these in good condition without the bezels all ripped apart and chewed up is difficult, but they are out there, and they do pop up on places like the forums and eBay. Even some vintage watch dealers and collectors have started finding these, sourcing these, and selling these because the demand is going up. Parts have dried up on eBay, and they are great watches. In fact, if you are into the Enicar Sherpas, Eric Wynn from Wind Vintage has a few of these. You can check him out as well. And of course, other vintage dealers have them in their inventories as well, so check that out. Actually, we had one at delraywatch.com not too long ago, and it sold in a few hours. It turned out we underpriced it, but we try to be competitive at least here at Delray Watch. So make sure to keep your eyes out for the Enicar Sherpas. This one is going up. Next, the Speedmaster 321. The Omega Speedmaster 321, not released yet, but recently announced in stainless steel. Here's the thing. I did a video about this watch recently, and I talked about how it's not really a Rolex Daytona alternative because Rolex buyers, in my opinion here, with the people that we work with in our business, are just a little bit different for the Rolex Daytona buyers than the Omega buyers. This specific watch has a 321 iconic movement. Everything is going to be fit and finish to the roof, and it's going to be luxury brand, which is at the forefront of what Omega has been known for, really high-end sports watches comparatively to what they did in the past, but this particular watch is going to be produced in limited quantities, especially for the first few years, so it is going to be difficult to get your hands on it. And considering we're talking about luxury goods, if someone really wants something in this space and they have the funding to do so, they're going to pay a premium. So I think the first few months we're going to see people on the forums and certain websites like eBay and Chrono24 try to double their money. Retail is $14,400. I don't think it's crazy to see people trying to get close to $30,000 for this like you do. Like you see for some of the other Speedmasters that come out in limited runs. What do you guys think about the 321? I know this one has so many debates. Leave in the comments below. Next, I think that all Valjoux 72 powered chronographs are going to be doubling, if not more, in the next 5 years. Valjoux 72s have powered some of the most iconic watches throughout history. Chronographs, that is, of course. It's a chronograph movement, including the Rolex Daytona Paul Newman and all of the other vintage Rolex Daytonas for that matter, with a couple of exceptions. So when we consider that and the parts scarcity, it's just another rising tide lifts all boats scenario to where all the watches with Valjoux 72s are going to go up, and you see it on the forums. I've made other videos talking about this as well, so check those out. But Valjoux 72s have already doubled in price across the board pretty much in the last 5 years. Start getting into things like Hoyers and some of the other brands, and this one is just a no-brainer, especially if you're a watch movement geek and less of a brand geek. Get some really great buys out there, and they're going up, so what is to hate about that scenario? And lastly, guys, I have a bit of a bonus one here on this list. All mechanical vintage Grand Seiko is going up. As Grand Seiko establishes themselves as more of a luxury brand and more of a powerhouse in the watch industry in the United States market, and not just with the most discerning of watch geeks, buffs, and collectors, we're going to see all Grand Seiko start going up in price. It's a lot like what Omega has done the last 10 years. Vintage Omega and modern Omega has gone up because of the way that the branding and the way that the brand has established themselves. So Grand Seiko is investing heavily into the brand, marketing, market share, and really making connections with us as watch collectors. So you can see it. Go to Chrono24, go to the forums, go to eBay. Vintage Grand Seiko is going up. That being said, there can be some headaches if you don't buy a great condition one, so make sure you're finding a good example, one that has a clean movement. Servicing can be difficult with these, especially if you need parts, but the parts exist somewhere out there in the world. So if the prices go up on these, you're going to see parts start trickling in because now it's worth it more for people to sell those parts. So vintage mechanical Grand Seiko as a bonus is a great option for those of you that are into the brand or looking at kind of more eccentric options. So guys, what do you think? Are there any other watches that you think are going to double, if not more, in price in the coming years? Leave in the comments below. Also, do you agree or disagree with anything here on the list? I'd love to talk about it in the comments below. Please do not forget the thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. Also, at delraywatch.com here, I've made another YouTube channel where you can check out what we do here in terms of business, how our business started, as well as different things we do to become more competitive, as well as grow and deliver a lot of value there in the watch community at delraywatch.com. And I'm on Instagram, The Real John P. Guys, it's Monday. I've got a whole list of emails to respond to. Thanks for watching. You have been chatting with John P. Ciao.